I'm Rich Andreski, Bureau Chief for Public Transportation at the Connecticut Department of Transportation. And I'd like to welcome you to Along the Lines, a podcast series where we'll explore current issues and ideas on Connecticut's public transportation system. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Along the Lines. I'm your host, Rich Andreski. Waterbury, Connecticut is a significant hub for our state's rail system. The Waterbury Line connects people in Waterbury and the Naugatuck Valley to Metro-North service on the New Haven line in Bridgeport, allowing customers to go to New Haven, New York, and all points in between. That's why the recently completed Waterbury Line upgrades are very exciting to talk about. The significant investments along the 27-mile rail line include tie replacement and track upgrades, signal and railroad crossing improvements, and the installation of positive train control. And for those that don't know, that is a system to prevent train-to-train collisions, overspeed derailments, and train incursions into established work zones. These upgrades in combination will now allow for 22 trains a day to run on the rail corridor beginning later this year, and pave the way for even more service in the future. It's interesting to note that the Waterbury Line uses the route that was originally built as the Naugatuck Railroad in 1849. The improvements we will talk about today were needed to modernize the historic line and bolster efficiency, safety, and the overall customer experience. In addition, these upgrades will benefit everyone who lives, works, or plays in the Naugatuck Valley, and we'll touch on that as well. So today, I'm pleased to be joined by Rick Dunn, Executive Director of the Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments, and Angela Luberes, Transportation Supervising Rail Officer from the Connecticut Department of Transportation. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Rich. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
It's great to have you on the program. We've known each other for some time, and Rick, I know what an advocate you are for the Naugatuck Valley. In a previous episode, we spoke about the role of the Council of Governments and the role that the COGs play in transportation planning. But for our listeners who may have missed it, can you tell our listeners about the Naugatuck Valley COG and how it impacts residents and employers in the region?
Sure. I guess it's important to note, without getting too technical, that the councils of governments in Connecticut, at least the urban ones, like Naugatuck Valley, are actually metropolitan planning organizations, which are the federally authorized entities that plan the transportation system working with the State Department of Transportation. So we do a lot of the long range planning. We approve federal funds to be used in certain projects, but we tie together the strands of overall planning, housing development. We do what are called build out scenarios to project how many people are going to live in what area in the future. And we look out 20 or 30 years and try and come up with activities that result in demand studies. And I guess, it's not well known, but this is the place, the Council of Governments, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, this is the place where the public really gets to participate in what the system and service levels look like in the future. So we've actually renewed our effort with a new communications team in the Naugatuck Valley this year to try and get out into the public, out to community groups, out to commuter groups, and getting them interested in participating in the long range planning for this region. So I think that's the best description of what we do. And like I said, we tie together housing, economic development, and all these other demand side activities that affect transportation options.
Rick, we talk about the close role that transportation plays with land use, and I think your role is really the ties that bind the two. So really important. Land use patterns around transportation nodes is critical, and I think honestly the only way we can grow rail ridership is if we take better advantage of land use and more intensive development around train stations. And I know that's happening in the Naugatuck Valley.
Yes, absolutely. Waterbury really led the way on this. Even pre-COVID, we were observing a significant trend of people from New York City primarily, and some of the Brooklyn neighborhoods where housing values were rising. We saw many of these people moving into the city of Waterbury, buying homes, and commuting back and forth to New York, maybe 1 or 2 days a week, and that was before COVID. So that was a trend that we knew was going on. We obviously worked with the department. Your office has been very helpful in getting the Waterbury train station back in good condition, good commuter parking, and we're working on the indoor waiting area with you guys now. But when we look at all of the communities up and down, so you have Waterbury with that trend, you had Shelton, where in the Derby Shelton rail station development area, they have built 800 market rate rental apartments and condominiums in the recent 4 years, 5 years. It's really amazing. For anyone who hasn't been to Shelton in a long time, you will not recognize the downtown and the waterfront area. So there's like 800 units there. In Derby, because of the rail improvements that have been announced, developers are now looking at and applying for permits to build about 200 rental apartments. Ansonia has plans for about 400 units on the board. And then obviously Naugatuck has a new station plan and a new development area. And all of these towns, we always say in the Naugatuck Valley, we have, so the term TOD, transit-oriented development, is something we all say in the industry. But I always say that the Naugatuck Valley towns have 19th century TOD because we have that rail and transit function running through our downtowns that were largely built in the 1850s and through the early 1930s. So we really have that connection. We have the ability to reuse what's already there to provide good options for commuters, not just within the Naugatuck Valley, but in and out of Fairfield County. And hopefully, if we get the improvements to the city of New Haven as well.
Yeah, Rick, in many ways, we have these quintessential New England villages and mill towns, and land use has certainly followed the railroad before the highways were even a dream. So couldn't agree with you more. And Angelo, you in the Office of Rail are leading the way in terms of the development of the Waterbury Line. We've made substantial investment over the last decade in the Waterbury Line, but we're not done yet. So first, can you tell our listeners a little bit about your role and in the Office of Rail, and then what we have in store for the Waterbury Line going forward?
Sure, Rich. So I'm a transportation supervising rail officer in the Rail Operations Division of the Office of Rail. And my role with this project is to determine how the recent upgrades affect train operations and make recommendations to improve train service within the various planning horizons, near term, midterm, and long term. So, we're excited to about this project and, to introduce all these various upgrades in the line.
So near term, midterm, and long term. Let's talk about the near term, the 2022. What do we have in store for riders this year?
So in 2022, we'll be increasing train service on the line to 22 trains per day. Currently, we operate 15 trains on the line, so an additional 7 trains per weekday.
Yeah. So Angelo, what you're saying really is that for the first time, this line will have regular peak period service where folks will have more frequent travel options and make it a more attractive service for everyday commuters. Is that right?
That's correct, Which the additional 7 trains per weekday will provide several more travel options and reduce service gaps throughout the day.
Yeah, frequency is key. I mean, I think we all know this as users of public transportation, that if you're going to count on public transportation, you need to know that you have options. So we're excited that this additional service will finally bring the Waterbury Line up to a service level that is attractive to many people. Angelo, we've also been working with Metro North and our contractors to upgrade reliability and capacity on the line. So that includes 13,000 railroad ties, the installation of 4 passing sidings, modernization of the signal system, at-grade crossing improvements, positive train control. Really, where is this taking the line long term? What does that mean for service levels in the mid to long term?
Right. So the various upgrades will improve safety and efficiency on the line, which will ultimately improve reliability of train service and create a better travel experience for passengers. So the upgrades will enable increased train service in the near term, as we just spoke about the additional 7 trains. But in the midterm and long term, it allows the potential to extend train service from Waterbury to Stamford and beyond. So we're very excited about that opportunity.
Yeah, the long-term aspiration, and I'll say it, you don't have to, is that, all of our rail lines statewide would get to, an hourly base level of service. And again, that's sort of the aspirational goal. We're some time away from that. It's not just infrastructure that we need to invest in, but the actual rail cars and locomotives to make that service possible. Rick, let's go back to you. We've already seen economic development. You've spoken about all of the housing that's happening. What's the scuttlebutt in the Naugatuck Valley right now around this new development?
We see two trends right now. The first one is obviously that residential values have increased substantially throughout Connecticut and particularly in the Naugatuck Valley. So we know from basic economics, the demand side is up. And what we're seeing, even though the costs of construction are higher, we're seeing developers who are reaching out and acquiring properties, acquiring the rights to develop properties. And as I said earlier, this is largely been driven. I've heard this from developers. I've sat on some selection committees in some of our communities, and I've heard directly from developers that it's because of these near-term, midterm, and long-term upgrades to service that they're willing to make these investments. It makes their property more valuable. It makes the downtowns more valuable. And frankly, even though it's greater value for these communities from an economic perspective, it's a deal for Connecticut because Connecticut needs a place to house its workers in the 21st century. And we really haven't done a lot to think about that. In Fairfield County, where commuters have traditionally lived and gotten on the train and gone to New York City to work, we can't, demographically, the people who are making $80, $90, even $120,000 a year, they don't live in Fairfield County. They can't afford to live along the coast. So the Naugatuck Valley has always been sort of a near place where people in those middle and lower management jobs could live and raise a family and buy a home for $250,000 as opposed to $1 million. So what we're seeing now, I think, is a generational change. Younger people who are filling these positions, who are starting out their careers, who are looking for housing and are less interested in owning a motor vehicle and paying for gas and all of the costs and headaches associated with that. So I think we're seeing all of these trends come together around the Naugatuck Valley. It's good for the Naugatuck Valley. It's good for residents. But it's really good for the state of Connecticut because it allows businesses to expand and not have to pay so much that they rule out coming to Connecticut. So I think that's been a tremendous benefit that we've seen throughout the last couple of years.
Rick, affordable housing, and what I mean by affordable is not necessarily low income, but housing that's affordable to an average household is important to economic growth. We're seeing around the country places where housing prices have gotten out of control and have hampered the ability to attract new residents and new businesses. So, affordable housing is a really key strategy. Any thoughts on that and how that positions us relative to the greater New England region?
10 years ago, we all thought it was insane to be paying $2,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment in downtown Stamford. Today, you pay $2,200 a month to live in a one or two bedroom apartment in downtown Shelton. That has caused the market to respond. So now the target across the river in Derby at the same rail station stop is $1,500 to $1,800 a month for rents. Ansonia is looking in that same target area as are the other communities up and down the Naugatuck Valley. Obviously, the farther away you get in terms of the commute, the less expensive the residential cost is, and that affordability is both big A and small a. There's plenty of affordably classified housing in Ansonia and Derby and to a lesser extent in Shelton and Seymour, certainly in Naugatuck and Waterbury. But building that middle section of housing for people who are starting out in a professional career or who are in middle management, it really provides that that gap. And to be able to have a 1 hour commute by rail is really, really important. You talked a little bit about the service level increases earlier. Closing that, well, on the Waterbury line, we call it the evening gap between 6 and 8:45 p.m. That's really been the disincentive to riding the train historically, is that while we could get people into Fairfield County on a timely basis, if they didn't make their transfer at Bridgeport at the train that runs at about 6 p.m., they were left without an option until 8:45. So it's really, really important that as we fill in the gaps in this schedule, people have a sense that they have some flexibility. If they have to stay late at work, if they have to get into the office early on a particular day, they can still use the train. And that's really important.
And that service, if anyone's wondering, is scheduled to start this summer. So when we say 2022, we don't mean the end of the year. It's relatively near term when we talk about the future service expansion. So Derby, we mentioned Derby. Rick, you mentioned Shelton. We're excited about some news for Derby, which is we've received a federal grant with your support, Rick, and certainly the support of Congresswoman DeLauro. And we're excited that we'll be bringing some improvements to the Derby station. The highlights there are, a new high-level platform for level boarding. We're going to have improved multimodal connectivity, amenities for bus customers waiting for bus service there, transferring to the train. There'll be electric vehicle charging spaces and some real-time information for customers. So we're excited about that, and that's really part of a larger program for the line. And Angelo, can you talk a little bit about what's in store for all of the stations on the Waterbury line?
Absolutely, Rich. So, you mentioned the high-level platforms, and for all the stations, we're looking at additional signage, improved landscaping, new pavement. We're also looking into possibly lengthening the platforms to accommodate future expansion, and also LED lighting. So those are some of the enhancements, future enhancements to come.
Yeah, I know our rail team is working hard to provide high-level platforms, so level boarding at every station. And that really creates opportunities for us when we think about the future rail fleet. Right now, we have to design a rail fleet with stairs so that people can climb down stairs to get off of a train. That's not a really great way to accommodate the public, but importantly, the high-level platforms provide level boarding for persons with mobility impairments. So now, if you're a person who uses a wheelchair, you'll have the ability to get on and off every station on the Naugatuck Valley. So that's coming soon, and it's really just about modernizing the line. For the first time in history, this line will be brought up to full rail modern rail standards. So we already talked about the signal system and the passing sidings, but now we'll have stations that are also modern and convenient, and more attractive for development. The goal here is there's a sense of permanence and a commitment to the service, and the private sector recognizes that, and the public is responding by relocating and buying and renting housing near train stations. So it's really a virtuous cycle where investments in public infrastructure beget private investment in housing. So as we think about the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, that's allocated $30 billion to improvements in the Northeast Corridor and rail in general. And Governor Lamont has said the money from this bill will help advance his Time for Connecticut rail plan. That is, for those that haven't heard, we've talked about that quite a bit. It's the plan to improve travel time between Connecticut and New York City. And, the Naugatuck Valley and the Waterbury Line are being better connected to that set of services. So, Angela, can you talk a little bit about the ability for the Waterbury Line riders to tap into those new services under Time for CT?
Sure, Rich. So first, I'll explain a little bit about Time for CT. The near term and longer term projects. So in the near term, Time for CT plan identified opportunities to reduce travel times between Connecticut and New York City through some strategic schedule modifications. And the plan also identified opportunities to increase speeds on the New Haven line by repairing and improving the existing infrastructure. And the Waterbury line will benefit because as we look to for better, like you said, better connectivity to mainline trains, the mainline trains will be able to operate faster and get passengers to New York City a lot sooner. But also as we look into future operations, and extending Waterbury Line trains to Stamford and even beyond to New York City, all of these different projects will definitely provide a benefit to Waterbury Line and Waterbury Line passengers.
Yeah, it's exciting. What we have the ability is not only to provide more frequent service, as you say, on the Waterbury line, but the travel time. If you're coming from the Waterbury communities, Waterbury or other Naugatuck Valley communities, you'll be able to get to New York City much quicker because we are shaving travel time off of the New Haven line. So all of these investments work in coordination and will certainly keep people coming back and thinking about using the service. So we're excited about that. It's evolution. The Time for CT program really is a near-term program. I can't stress that enough. That's not the ultimate vision, but it is a near-term program to leverage travel time improvements. And then we're also going to be looking at further investment long-term to continue to drive down that total travel time to New York, which is so critical.
Yeah, Rich, if I could, the travel time issue for us as a metropolitan planning organization, we look at travel time for both rail and highway, and we try and look at them in the context of each other. One of the things that's happened over the last 25 years is the affordable, convenient highway commute from the Naugatuck Valley to Stamford. It used to take an hour 20 years ago. Today, that can be a 2.5-hour commute. We have backups on Route 8 on the highway that can run 7 or 8 miles from Derby back to Seymour and Beacon Falls every morning. So when you look at travel time, it is a much faster way. If trains can be more convenient in the way this your team has planned it out and is rolling it out starting in 22, starting the summer, that's going to provide options for people who are in cars today. And we really think there's a significant opportunity to move people from cars to rail because it's going to be a faster ride. It's going to be a more convenient ride. And they're going to have a great deal of flexibility that they don't have today. We're really focused on that Waterbury to Stamford run as well as to New York City. But we have to look at this as an investment of taxpayer dollars in the right mode. If we don't improve this rail service on this corridor, the department and the people of Connecticut are going to end up spending probably a couple of $2 billion to improve the Route 8 corridor. There are so many bottlenecks, particularly the crossing of Route 8 over the Housatonic River from New Haven into Fairfield County every day. That's a real bottleneck. That could be a multi-billion-dollar project to replace a perfectly good bridge just because there's a capacity issue. It's our hope that these rail expansions and improvements are really going to take the pressure off of that and save the state and the taxpayers money over time by making smarter investments in rail and bus.
Rick, excellent point. During the pandemic, we saw intrastate travel, regain some of the ridership in that market much more quickly than the New York ridership. And I think we have an opportunity, you're absolutely right, to better connect Connecticut cities and hubs. There are many jobs in Stamford where if you live in the Naugatuck Valley, it's not a terrible commute on the train, but it's aggravating and painful if you have to get in a car and do that trip every day. Never mind the fact whether you can afford a car or the gas prices that we're seeing today, right?
Absolutely. I have to tell you, anecdotally, I was with a friend over the weekend who just got a new job. Headquarters are in Stamford, and he has to commute now 3 days a week from the city of Derby to the city of Stamford. He was thrilled. He had made the trip a couple times on the train. Little concerned that if he had to stay late, he would have trouble getting home at night. And I assured him, I said, "No, just wait for the summer. We're going to be the department will be rolling out a new schedule and additional service in the evening." So we're really looking forward to that. But I think that people will truly use this service. This is not a bad investment. This is a really smart investment. And I think that most people who work in Fairfield County and live in the Naugatuck Valley are going to be taking advantage of this, particularly as we expand it even further after the 22 train service.
Yeah, that's our key focus now is continuing the investment and strategically thinking about how do we bring on those additional improvements to benefit as many people as possible. There's so many projects on the New Haven line that don't only just benefit the New Haven line riders, but are going to benefit those Naugatuck Valley commuters alike. And that includes some major movable bridges. We've got a capital program that includes replacement of some very significant infrastructure, curve realignments on the railroad to improve speeds, and of course a new rail fleet that we're now in development. So lots more to come. Stay tuned. We could do a whole nother episode of this podcast on those projects. All right. And Rick and Angela, thank you so much for being on the program. I'll give you an opportunity for a closing thought or two. So Rick, first to you.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. It doesn't get enough play in my mind, and I hope this podcast is well received, particularly by people who don't closely follow transit issues, because I think it's a new horizon for commuters in Connecticut, and this administration and this team at DOT have really made a commitment to rail and transit. So good things are coming. I can say on behalf of the 19 chief elected officials that I represent up and down the Naugatuck Valley, that they're excited about these improvements. They're excited about the developments for their community, and they're excited about the future. So we really want to thank you guys for all the work you've put in.
Rick, thanks for making the time to be on the program. Really appreciate it.
Anytime.
And Angelo, over to you for some closing thoughts.
Yeah, Rich, thanks again for allowing me to be a guest on this podcast. The DOT is very excited about the upgrades to the Waterbury Line. As you mentioned before, the 22 trains, that'll be additional 7 trains per weekday. We're excited to offer more travel options to passengers on the Waterbury Line, and we look forward to any further enhancements that we can help provide a better travel experience for those on the Waterbury Line and those in Connecticut in general.
And Angelo, I'll give you a plug and say that I've been working with you for quite some time now, and I know that you are a hands-on leader at the DOT, and I see you in the field quite often, and I know you'll be out there with the launch of this new service to make sure everything goes smoothly.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rich.
So once more, I'd like to thank our guests, Rick Dunn from the Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments and Angela Luberes from the Connecticut Department of Transportation. Remember, you can always find previous episodes of Along the Lines on your favorite podcast platform, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and SoundCloud. Previous episodes and more information can be found on our new website, alongthelines.ct.com. I'm Rich Andreski. Join us next time for another episode of Along the Lines. Thanks for listening to this episode of Along the Lines. This is your host, Rich Andreski. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please remember to subscribe and share.